Welcome to Raw, Real, and Reconnected. I'm your host, Alexander Hill, and today we have Matt Belair with us. Matt is an author, a speaker, a coach, an incredible athlete. He wrote a book called Zen Athlete, and it's really an honor to have him on here. We do a lot of similar work, but I got to be honest, Matt's been in the game since before, like 10 years before we met at Burning Man. So welcoming you on here, brother, and excited to chop it up with you and share our journeys and stories into fatherhood and all that good stuff. Welcome.
Oh, what's up, man? It's so great to see you. And, yeah, our connection goes back to the Burning Man days, bro. And so it doesn't get deeper than that. I've always appreciated you and your work. And it's just a pleasure to be here and speak with you.
I'm reflecting back to that moment we met at Burning Man, and I think it was you introduced yourself as ayahuasca. I think you said your name was ayahuasca, and I'm like, oh, really? Like, that's cool.
Yeah, it's funny. Like, you know how the Burning Man names go. It's so interesting. Like, just even that being my name at Burning Man, because the camp that I originally went with, they didn't think like I thought. And I had, done ayahuasca maybe for the first time before I went that year. And apparently I didn't shut up about it. And so on the Friday that week, they're like, all right, we've given you your name and it's ayahuasca. And the first year that I went back, very few people knew what it was. Then the second year, more people knew. The third year, it was more often that people knew. And then the last year is almost everybody knew. And so it was kind of like before that, it became mainstream. And I kind of watched that happen when I would tell people the name that I had on the playa and how they, understood that or recognized it. So by the fifth year, every single person knew what that was.
I think that was 2016 that we met. Um, and then I met you at Burning Man before I was married, and then came back, I think 2 years later with my wife. So a lot transpired in that time. And then I remember seeing you down at the Envision Festival as well. So we've crossed paths a number of times, brother. And yeah, just honoring you and acknowledging you for the work that you're doing. And you want to talk a little bit about what you're up to and what's alive for you these days?
Yeah, sure. Well, I've been in the podcast game for the last 5, 6 years. And, I just wanted to share the stories and wisdom of people that I appreciated. And at the same time, I couldn't have deep conversations with any of my friends. I could go deep with maybe one or two friends, and that was it. And so the original idea was, well, let's record these shows because, or these conversations, because these are valuable. We're talking about, deep topics that we were exploring on an individual level, but it wasn't mainstream. I couldn't have these conversations with anyone. I kind of grew up and I thought the same as everyone else, and it really clicked in for me that I didn't think the same as my friends when everybody was going to university. Because that year when we had to do university in Canada, we had to do an Ontario academic credit. So you had to do an extra year of high school and then 4 years of university. So that's 5 years of schooling. And so I could have got right out of high school, gone right into college without doing that extra year of high school, and then finished a lot earlier. And I was like, man, like another 5 years of school, like I'm ready to explore the world. I'm ready to go test myself, to get some experiences, to go do some things. Education will be there and I can come back. But not one person was thinking, what's my life purpose? What did I come here to do? What do I want to explore? Who am I? Right? What do I want to master? Nobody was asking what I thought were very important, very critical questions. And that's when I was like, oh, wow, like, I guess I'm very different than these people, because I had a great relationship with my friends. They were amazing people. They still are to this day. But we didn't think the same. You know what I mean? I was kind of an outcast in that way. And so that's where the podcast finally, in my early 20s, one of my best friends kind of woke up and we started having deep talks. And then 3 more years later, so I was about 25 at the time, we had another friend. So it was just two of us in my whole life that I could have deep conversations with. And so after I did a lot of exploring in my big travels to Nepal and Everest, and meditating with the monks, training up MMA in Thailand, and training with Shaolin monks. When I got back, I was like, the easiest way for me to do this is just start recording these shows. And so it's been a 5-year journey. And now, yeah, I'm a new father. So that's obviously changed the game, as you know. and still working on the podcast, now working more in the coaching. I had always worked with professional athletes and high level athletes, snowboard coaching, and then extreme sports athletes and Olympians and things like that. And I did some coaching here and there, but my highest priority was experience, knowledge, and travel. And so if you're dedicating to those things, you don't have that same time to work. So you're not going to work a full-time job and go be a lawyer at the same time. Although some people do, and they're badasses for doing that. Being able to do university full-time and then educate. So my number one thing was educate myself and fully immerse and get the money that I need to grow. And now with the daughter, I'm growing the coaching business with a little bit more balance of the podcast, because the podcast took me 40 to 60 hours a week for the last 5 years. And it's basically a public service volunteer job. Only a couple of years ago, I started making $500 a month on Patreon, which is not enough to live on, especially when you're traveling and paying for all the courses and all the things that I was doing. And so now it's like, all right, well, what's the thing that I can contribute? The podcast is for free. There's 451 episodes. And then the coaching, that's something that I could do a little bit more of and help more people and put a little bit of effort, because all of my effort was on what am I going to do now? What kind of training? Who am I going to go learn from? What kind of course am I going to buy now? You know what I mean? I spent 5 months, training with a Native American elder, and then, traveling the world training with other Indigenous elders. So it takes your full time and commitment. And so now I'm just kind of merging those two worlds of saying, okay, this is the gift to the world. And part of that also is research as well for the podcast and things like that. And then, this is my service. And so, yeah, so that's where I am right now with holy smokes, the way the world is studying. I'm studying heavily law, and I'm studying survival, and I'm studying, how to be a homesteader. So all of these studies are very fascinating, a little bit stressful, but it's exciting times.
I love it, man. I love it. And you talk about something that's really important. Podcasting, it seems like it's a great way to open your heart. It's a great way to discover things and learn things. I mean, I think it's one of the best ways to educate yourself and stay lit, stay lit and follow your interests, follow your passions, market yourself in a way, but really you got to love it. The best podcasters out there, you got to really love it, and you got to keep moving forward with that curiosity. And it's like bright-eyed, bushy tail, right? you got to have it. You got to keep it going. And yeah, it's really interesting. Let's talk about this, bro. Like business, right? So business and podcasting. In my experience, I've been building my coaching business, which is Man Tribe, for the past year, and it's working. We've had over 70, 80 guys come through our group coaching programs, and now the podcast is launching. So it's like this foundation has already been built. So I think, being on episode 5 or 6 here, like literally this one, I think it's going to it's going to sort of funnel into, or my intention is that people get to know me on here and people get to know what our work is about. And then that can funnel into the business that's sort of established already.
Yeah, that's a really good idea. My background, I did so many different jobs, and one of the things that I was studying in my early years was mindset. I've always been interested in mindset and mind power, and so that got into hypnosis, which led into marketing and persuasion. And so I made a living off marketing for a while. And so when people are trying to market something, I always say, hey, look, be the thing that you want to educate on, right? If you are doing coaching, or you're doing a business in yoga, or you're doing a business in wellness, and it's like some sort of product, educate the field on what you love. And I think that Aubrey Marcus did a really great job about this with the kettlebells and on it. So he did sell the kettlebells and has those products, but he would get experts to show you how to use it. And I feel like that's how we need to embody this. It's like, all right, well, if here's the thing that we're going to create as a business, and that business should add real value to other people, that transforms them in some sort of positive way, then educate around that. Because if you have a kettlebell, well, that's one thing, but you also need to know about nutrition, how to use it, and all these other things that move into health, wellness, mindset, and then spirituality. And so pretty much any offer that you can provide for other people that's meaningful and that you're inspired to give. So it's your vocation, it's your life purpose, it's your choice. You're creating your life on purpose as an entrepreneur. Then it's always going to be of service to other people. And that's a really challenging space to go into because it's uncertain. Right. You were in finance and real estate. Right. And so you'd have basically a pretty certain income, right? You're like, well, I'm probably going to make at least this much money. I can do this job and I'm going to receive that amount of money back. It's a very certain thing. And basically what you're going to do each day and how things function, and you can work around that. But if you want to go heart led, spirit led, who you really are as an individual, it's going to be a complete mystery. You're not going to have any certainty. And so it is for those who have courage, and it's the most beautiful journey. And I feel like, it's really important if you want to have real fulfillment. You can have real fulfillment in a regular job. And most people have something that inspires them, right? Something that they want to explore, something they're curious about, something they want to test themselves. And for most people, you're going to get more genuine fulfillment if you pursue that. Because I did an interview years ago with Frank Ostaseski. He wrote The 5 Invitations, What Death Can Teach Us About Truly Living. He was the founder of Zen Hospice, and he talks about what people regretted when they died. And so, a lot of it was not going for it, was not honoring ourselves. And recently I did a post on where we don't make the decision that aligns with our internal integrity. We compromise our spirit in some way. And that's the inner voice, right? We start to compromise a little bit, just a little bit, and then a little bit, and then a little bit. And then all of a sudden, we don't know who we are a year or 5 years or 10 years down the road because we kept compromising, and we compromised our values, who we were, who we wanted to be, who we know we could have shaped. We want to, maybe we would fail, but we want to give it our best shot. And if we don't give ourselves that honor to at least try, those are the biggest regrets that we have when we get older, and we're like, oh man, I really understand now that I'm 70 years old. I could have tried that for 20 years. And if I would have dedicated even just a little bit of time over 20 years, I would have been at least reasonably successful. And so one of the big traps I see out there is this get rich quick mentality. And even with the manifestation and law of attraction and esoteric, I love that stuff. I've gone super deep into that stuff. I know that it's possible for, instant manifestation. Maybe one day we'll have these new abilities where we can manifest instantaneously, but it's not now. And right now it's a bit of a trap because people want that. So they get discouraged rather than merging the two worlds of the esoteric, the visualization, the mindset, the beliefs, and all those important aspects with the chop wood and carry water, real tangible work. And as you know, now getting into podcasting, people don't recognize how much work that is, right? It's a ton of work, and you have to do it for the love. And if you do it for the love, you're going to overcome those obstacles, which are inevitable when you create your reality on purpose rather than by default with whatever the world will provide for you.
Yeah, it's been a beautiful journey so far, and I haven't even launched the Spotify or RSS Apple feeds yet, but it'll all come. I'm doing this. I love it. I have a lot of amazing guests, just like yourself, coming on to support, and yeah, no doubts about it. And you mentioned Zen. What is your experience with Zen? What does Zen mean to you? How has Zen helped you?
Well, it's interesting because I'm starting to come back to that. And so in my teenage years, I was always curious about enlightenment. How do I become enlightened? What is that? And I was reading so many books on Zen. And I feel like that's really shaped my philosophy on how I approach life. And it's a very practical wisdom. It's very confusing, and it's full of riddles at times. And for me, it just exemplified the center, the middle way, the middle path, right? You have the yin and yang, right? You have both sides. You have good and evil. You have dark and light. You have everything. It's all encompassing. And so for the Zen aspect, for me, it's like, okay, how can I, number one, remain unattached to what's happening? So some of the stuff in the world, I'm not going to be able to control, right? I have to accept that as a universal truth, right? And so can I remain centered? Can I stay the middle path? And the other thing that Zen really taught me was awareness. being aware of myself and my thoughts and my dialogue and understanding what was actually me and what was not me. And so, if you think about it, you are not your thoughts, right? So you're not your thoughts. If your arm gets chopped off, you're not your right arm or your left arm. Or if you think about the Monty Python sketch where the guy gets his arm chopped off, and then his other arm chopped off, and then his legs, and he's like, "Come over here, I'm going to bite you." And so that guy's got some tenacity right there. I feel like a lot of us could use that. But we're not our bodies either. So we're not our thoughts, we're not our bodies, we're not our beliefs. So what the heck are we? And then when you go into certain meditations, you observe your mind, right? That's some of the Zen meditations, and it comes from other philosophies as well. You observe the mind, but then you go a step back after you've kind of done that for a bit, and then you observe the observer. Now you're in for a real funk, because then what the heck is going on there? And so, Zen for me is just, how do I get to a space of internal peace in the chaos of the world, keeping my internal chaotic nature, the monkey mind, and all those different things in a centered point when I am experiencing potentially chaos in the world, keeping that it's always available to have that inner peace. Although I'm still learning it and I'm no master of it, I love the ideas and I love the philosophies. It's a guiding principle. And so that's what it means for me, is the center way, and doing my best to live in peace and to live in presence, and know that that's enough. And then also allowing this mystery to be what it is, because we only know a little tiny fraction of what's going on here. A little tiny bit of a little tiny bit. We are in this really amazing cosmic mystery.
Totally. When the Krispy Kreme thing came out yesterday, I was like, this is the epitome of the cosmic joke that we're in right now. I don't know if you heard about it.
Yeah, they're offering free donuts to take the quaxine.
For an entire year, you get daily Krispy Kremes if you get vaccinated. So I did kind of a parody video on it. But yeah, here we are. Here we are. It is what it is, and this is really happening. And who's we and where exactly are we? But what you mentioned is the observing the observer. Just that practice of going into meditation and just processing that will take you for a little loop. I just did it.
Yeah. Oh yeah. And you could do a simple one too. Like when you're doing something, put your awareness above your head and
Mhm.
observe yourself walk around. And so when you realize that your consciousness or your focus is non-local, that's when you start to get into strange things like distance healing or astral projection or remote viewing. And I've seen these kids now. My friend Dr. Edith Ubuntu Chan, she showed this video of her son basically being able to see with his blindfold on. And I know there are magic tricks where you can do this. And I was like, Dr. E, this isn't a magic trick. She's like, no, I've been training him since he's been a kid. And imagine, and I've always been curious about this. What if you had a child from 0 to 5 and you told them that, telepathic abilities exist and they can cultivate them? Right. Just like a kid, if you're 5 years old and you would see me on my snowboard when I was snowboarding all the time and I'm flying off this massive jump, you could say that's possible for you. Right. That's possible for you. You can develop that ability. That's within you. And what happens in our world is it is strategically limited on purpose, because you can trap and manipulate the logical mind. And so that's what's happening here in every single way. Programming and distraction and literally very dark forces just limiting our spirits, our souls, our connections, our creativity, our connection with nature, and all those different things. And so when you realize you have certain abilities, it becomes normal, but it's also simple. It's not special. It's more like, oh, I realize that I am connected to nature. Now let me just figure out a more simple lifestyle. Where
Mm.
could I go where I wake up and I'm not in the rat race working these insane hours to then look at a screen on television to have this show that's indoctrinating me, right? Give me entertainment because I need a reprieve from all this nonsense and all this stress that I'm doing just to live, just to
Mm.
stay alive. So if you wake up, like when I work with my indigenous elders, they were always more connected to the land and just what they were doing. It wasn't anything special where like if you go to the festivals like Burning Man or wherever, right? Everyone is like, this amazing thing, and we got all the crystals going, which I like. And I still have your tuning fork, by the way, which is one of the most beautiful gifts ever. And my daughter wasn't feeling well, so I was using the tuning fork and using that on her, and she really loves it. And so, yeah, there is this magical element, but to them, it's very simple, right? Well, go connect more with nature, right? What birds are out there? What do you see around you? Connect fully, deeply with everything around you. And so you realize that some things you begin to change your values a little bit, right? And what's most important. And so it simplifies rather than complicates. So in complication, you can get distracted and manipulated. And in simplicity, you see clearly, you move a little bit slower, you have more awareness.
I love it, man. So much good stuff in here. I'm a huge proponent of practical wisdom. I grew up in New York City where time was money and I was hustling around and I always wanted the quickest, fastest way to do things. And if you got a minute or two, right, and you're completely out of alignment or you're feeling some weird energy and you're not sure what it is, how do you drop in? What do you do? What's the quickest way for you to move energy and for you to get back into flow state or just get back into coherence and presence?
It's a really great question. Wherever we put our attention, we put our energy and focus. And so the
Mm.
simplest thing that I suggest for people is to place their awareness in their heart and just take in 3 deep breaths. And if they really need to reset, just make them long because it's going to make you focus on it. So you could do 5 or 10 seconds in, then you do 5 or 10 second hold wherever you are at your breath because maybe people can't breathe in that deeply, and then out. So let's just say 5 seconds. So 5 seconds in, hold the breath 5 seconds, and then let it out for 5 seconds, and just do 3 of them. But place your consciousness in your heart. And that's it. Don't do anything beyond that. If you need to do a few more breaths, go ahead. But if you place your awareness in your heart is in natural coherence, you know, all the time. It's beating, it's doing what it's supposed to. So that's where you're placing your awareness, is not in your head, because interesting thing about mindset and all this work is it's all a lot of the mindset work out there, and the psychology and the personal development and self-help and even spirituality, it's all in the mind. There's a huge issue with that. The mind can be programmed, and there are simple ways to do that through hypnosis, affirmations, and many other techniques. The challenge is when you're consciously trying to change your mind can only hold 5 to 7 bits of information at a time. So little bits of information. And so as you're focusing on that, your mind is also responsible for your safety. So if we're trying, even if we're in a safe space, it's going to be kind of on alert because it's just monitoring if there's anything dangerous out there. Just like if you cross the street, you are looking both ways so you don't get smoked by a car, especially in New York City. I'm reminded of Elf. Watch out for the yellow ones. The yellow ones don't stop. And so, the heart has a different operating system. It knows you're eternal. And so when we can start to connect with that a little bit more, we're going to get different answers and different points of view, because the mind will skew everything around survival and what it's meant to do, what it's supposed to do for you. And so that's why a lot of the stuff that I teach and focus on the podcast on is like, get the perspective from your heart, learn how to do that and write it out and learn how to connect with it. So then the conscious mind is learning how to navigate and problem solve the reality as it should. It's gonna create systems. It's gonna create plans. It's gonna create outcomes. It's gonna do all the things that we need to do with our calendar and all those different types of things. It's gonna figure out how the money's gonna work and things like that. But it's got to be heart led. And the reason why so many people are manipulated and they feel unfulfilled and they're like, what am I doing here? I don't feel worthy. I feel disconnected. Well, it's because your head is leading you and it's not supposed to. It's supposed to be your
Mhm.
heart, which is connected to your spirit and soul and your integrity and what you're made to do by your own definitions.
Mhm.
And the important thing I think for people to understand is that so often we look at the lowest common denominator of what we're capable of. So what's the worst case scenario? What if I fail and I become homeless and all that kind of stuff, rather than, what we're capable of, really truly testing ourselves as powerful creators. And when we test ourselves as a powerful creator, you need to understand that failure is inevitable and a part of the process. And so many people that I work with and see out there, it's all about fear. and that limits them because their fear of what will the public think, or this random person on YouTube or out there on Instagram that I have never ever met before, or my family, and it inhibits them from taking the first step. And it's incredible how powerful that is, and that comes from mind. It comes from that box of that identity. And if we can just see it for what it is, it immediately um, is nullified. It becomes not frightening at all, and we're able to move forward with knowing, okay, that might be a part of it, but that's not a problem. It's not as a big idea, as big and a problem or an idea as I thought it was. So I've recognized it. It's like, if you're a child and you see like a silhouette of a dinosaur and it gets big on the wall and you're like, oh my God, like this thing is so crazy. Then you turn on the light, you just look at it. It's like, oh, it's this little fluffy dinosaur in the corner. That's okay. And so that's what we want to do with our fears. And when we bring them out in the open, we realize 99% of the time, they're not as frightening as we think they are.
1000%. And, as you're saying this, I'm thinking about, all those years that I was addicted to caffeine. I couldn't wake up without a cup of coffee or, a matcha or something. I needed it. Right. And as we know, for a lot of people, especially open-hearted, sensitive people that feel, caffeine can constrict the body and put us into fight or flight. And as you're speaking, I'm thinking of these people that are in fight or flight because of caffeine out there, and I know there's a lot of them. And also this idea of the fear of public speaking. Do you think those things go together, like fight or flight, and like also this fear of what other people think, or this fear of speaking in front of others? And do you think they're connected in any way?
I think that there are many common things that people are afraid of. So public speaking is one of the largest ones, and it's because we don't want this external force, which is the public, to shame us. We're afraid of failure. We're afraid of messing up. We're afraid of looking stupid. And so, if we could just embrace that, it would be in a very powerful place to be. And one of the examples I'll give when I'm coaching is say, okay, they want to do this thing. And it's also very fascinating, as a side note, before I dive in, is that it's only when people are really good at something often that they are more afraid. So if they're a very good writer or they're a very good painter, they'll be 10 times more resistant than put out their work than somebody who is casually doing it or doesn't care at all, because they're
Mhm.
so afraid of what people will think rather than just create. And so when I'm working with them, I say, okay, here's a thing, they're doing some writing, and they have these fears come up, which is very often. And I'll say, all right, just imagine everybody writes you a handwritten letter about how terrible your work is, how terrible your new podcast is, how terrible your art is, how terrible everything is. Like, just imagine that for a moment. And they do. And I say, well, even if that's true, can you overcome that? Was this an expression of you that you wanted to do, that was important to you? And if they say yes, say, okay, well, then you can deal with that. That's okay, because that's outside of you. That there is the energy holding you back, and the excuse you're making, and this veil that you need to get past so you can be who you truly are. Because that 99% of the time won't happen. Maybe you'll get a hater here and there, and that's okay, but it's not as bad as you think. It might sting for a second, but don't let that keep you down. You know what I mean? And so that idea is something that is so very common, is this external validation, and it's something that is programmed in us. There's so much programming in our reality that people have no idea about, and it's very strong. But the good news is, it's just like turning on the light. Once you identify it, you can nullify it immediately. And one of the common ones I had when I worked with athletes was so many athletes I'd work with, they would come in second. They're the best athlete in their field, right? And they would come in second. They would self-sabotage all the time. And whenever they would get recommended to me and we'd start chatting, I'd have a chat with them. And I knew what it was going to come down to was self-worth. I knew it, before we even start chatting, and we would go. And then I'd figure out a time. I was like, oh, and we would go back. And then I'd say, hey, remember the first time where you didn't feel worthy of being number one? They'd find some sort of childhood memory. And then we would explore that and say, you know, are you comfortable with being number one? And like, not really. I don't want to be in the limelight. I don't want to be that person. You know, I don't feel like I'm worthy of that. And we would just reframe it and say, this is you doing your best. You know, is it true that you want to do your best, that you want to test your capabilities? Is it true that in sport, that when we see someone else succeed, if we're in it for the right reasons, we aspire to that level? It's a beautiful thing. And so when we reassociate that immediately, 100% of the time, it was honestly 100% of the time, they got first next time, every single time. It was absurd how, and I was like, holy smokes, like this is amazing. Right. And so they became confident who they were. And so having self-worth is something that is very important. And all that's required is us for to just do a self-analysis of these things, to just take a look at them and then add our consciousness to it, spread our light, figure out what's true, what's not true, what's the worst case scenario. Can I handle that? Yes. Now let's go.
Hell yeah, man. We're getting deep here, and there's a lot of good stuff packed in here, and I want to just keep diving into it. So I was listening last night to one of the original podcasts with Aubrey and Joe Rogan, and they were talking about just as they were kind of building their friendship like 6-7 years ago, and they were talking about how when you're a fighter and you're number one, you know, there's so much pressure. There's so much opinion, there's so much heaviness, and you know that there's this element of psychology that happens where you have to shut everything external out in order to focus in on your energy and the next fight, right? So they say they were describing like this level of madness that can happen, right, when you're the best at something. Do you agree with that you could go insane by being number one and you know, feeling that pressure?
Well, there are so many different elements to that question. I think that George St. Pierre really talks about that madness or that obsession. If you want to be the greatest that ever was, you need to dedicate your entire being to that thing. And I remember studying sports psychology and reading so many books on that. I remember one example of a person saying, if you want to be an Olympic gold medalist, you need to commit suicide. You need to, and then it went on to say, you need to commit friendship suicide, family suicide, every you know, food suicide, every single thing that would prevent you from being the absolute greatest athlete you can be in this discipline is your only focus. You eat, sleep, and breathe this thing. And so, yeah, that would require a level of madness. Now, I think it really depends on the pursuit, because
Well, that's a judgment too, right? Saying that's madness it's not necessarily madness, right? It's
yeah,
just
yeah,
focus.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. It would be obsession or maybe desire,
Mhm.
right? Whatever the case is. But yeah, you know, like Van Gogh, which your painting reminds me of, you know, he had a level of obsession. So I don't see madness as a bad thing if it's who they are and what they want to pursue and what they're made to do in their bones and their DNA, and to say, you know what, this pursuit, I want it to consume my entire being. This is fully who I am and how I want to express. And then that's the level of obsession necessary to compete at the highest level in anything, where others are striving for that too. You must have that. You must have that dedication, this unwavering thing, unless you have, you know, insane talent. There's like freaks like John Jones, who I don't think had the same dedication as everybody else, but he's also a physical specimen, had natural ability, but he also worked his butt off. Like, don't get me wrong, he would have had to work extraordinary hours, which the average Joe wouldn't be able to do. And
Mhm.
so, yeah, that's how I'd answer that.
Yeah, and I don't think it's necessarily just fighting either. You look at like Michael Phelps, for example, who was a total beast and just, you know, crushed it. One of the greatest swimmers, the greatest swimmer of all time, and then he retired at 26 or 27, I think, and then he had, you know, this mental health, you know, thing that happened to him because he didn't know who he was. He literally said, I heard this on Tim Ferriss, but he said it at one point that he swam more laps in the pool than he walked steps.
Yeah, that's amazing. And I'm glad you brought that up, because some of the other work that I did with athletes was after sport, who are they? Because
Mm,
that's all they know. They eat, breathe, and sleep their sport, their practice. And so when they're done, they're like, oh my goodness, where am I going to put all that creative energy? Right. I have my life designed for me. And so I like the example of Conor McGregor right now, because he was somebody who imagined being in the UFC. He imagined being a two-time champion and achieved that. Then he did. And I think he was like 30 something. He was pretty young. And then, okay, you imagine setting yourself an extraordinary goal, reaching that goal, then what's next? And he's always had a very strong mindset. Well, now he's got a kid. And now what's happened is he's shifted his focus, but uses that same tenacity. And so, with other sports like snowboarding, it's not as intense. It's more fun, right? It's more like people get into a fun, but now it's getting more competitive. It wasn't like this when I first started snowboarding, but with the Olympics and all that kind of stuff, same with skateboarding. It was more a personal endeavor, and there was a bit more of a balance. It wasn't so serious. You don't get up, you skated all day because you loved it that much. And that's why it's so unique. Where other sports, you really don't play it the same way. You have to do all these other training. For hockey, you go to hockey practice and you shoot and you might like it, and then you go to the weights and you hit that. Well, skateboarding is like kind of just skating all day. You know what I mean? Just skating all day, and you just love it. I don't know any other sport where they love it. Oh, well, surfing and the extreme sports. I feel like people are just, they so resonate with being in the ocean or snowboarding or whatever the case is. And so, you know, these types of sports, and also Conor McGregor going to this next phase of his life, what what are you sacrificing to be the best at that point? Right? That's when you
mm.
start to retire. You start to look at retirement, because maybe family becomes more important, and you reshift your value because you realize how much that you have to give up. And so that's why understanding our values is so important, and having them external on a board in your calendar, knowing, am I living and showing up to my highest values, right? If you have a family, say, my kids are number one and I see them an hour a week, well, you can create a bridge to being around your kids more if you first decide it. You must first decide that and know that that's most important to you, or you'll keep on the tracks that you've created as a victim, saying, well, this is just the way it is, and you'll
Mm.
never get more time with your kids. You can always problem solve to the next scenario once you identify it. And so that's why our value systems are so important, and we can achieve extraordinary things when we're clear on our values and we add all these techniques. And like I said at the beginning, when somebody really gets closer to enlightenment, spiritual understanding, higher levels of consciousness, and how people define that, in my view, they get closer and closer to simplicity, closer and closer to the earth, closer and closer to their community.
Yep.
Not bigger out there in the world, not more seminars, not more money, not more downloads, not more likes. They're so connected to the real world, the real relationships, the relationship with their mother, their friends, their community, who they might be serving. And they just simplify it so much so they can live in the present, and they recognize the other value of life, who they are and what they want to practice, how they want to give their time to their kids and their community, and what they want to learn. And so I feel like there's different ideas of excellence, and I feel like when people get more connected to their soul, excellence is more about quality of life and quality of relationship, and then contribution to your community or the world.
Real talk. Love it, brother. That's yeah, what you were saying too about athletes, who are you after your career is done? Who are you, when the sport or your reign is over, right? You were this person, people saw you as X, and now, it's over. What does your life look like? I'm drawing a commonality as to, veterans or people of service that come out of the military or come out of the army. They have their tribe in there. There's trust, there's brotherhood, there's accountability, there's a mission, there's a purpose. And then they come out, and we're seeing, increased uh, mental health issues with PTS. I don't even say PTSD anymore, but just PTS, and just everything that's happening in there. So would you say the same thing happens to veterans, or do you think it's different?
Yeah, absolutely. And even more so, can you go over those elements you just shared? You said a mission and a purpose,
Mhm.
accountability, brotherhood. That's what we need as a human being. That's what all of us require is community. These are the highest values of an awakened human. And so the problem is it's steering in the military. It's not by your design. It's by the government's design. So ideally, it's for a worthy cause and a worthy aim. And I feel like I thought about going in the Canadian military. I'm all for protecting people and I know some absolutely righteous human beings in the Canadian and the US military. The challenge I have with that is sometimes the people at the top might not share those same values. And so that's what we want to be really clear on is what are we intending? Ensuring at the highest levels that integrity is not compromised,
Right.
for no reason whatsoever. Because if we're going to especially go into battle and harm, it has to be protection, right? It can't be to take from other people. It can't be Genghis Khan going around conquering everything, right? It needs to be we protect ours. If you come to our place, you come to my home as a martial artist and somebody knows what they're doing, you are going to get smoked if you come here to cause harm. Absolutely smoked with everything. And so, with and that's a lot of the masculinity. And you see this what's going on. And we've had this masculinity demonized, right? And you're doing man work, and I see a lot of other people doing men's work, which I think is so important right now. It's been this strategic thing to take out the men, and the reason being is that men protect the village. In the indigenous cultures that I learned from, they had a grandmother's council, and if they were going to go to war, the grandmothers would then give the okay to the army, which would be full of men and protectors, right? And what's going on right now is such a confusion. You look at these kids and what's going on, and even adults, that I've talked to, and their brains have been so skewed from a whole lifetime of uh, high school to then university to the brainwash programming, and they can't see past the blocks that been set up for them. And it's just so surprising. And so we do need that masculinity, we do need that protection. And so imagine having all those principles that is provided by the US military, our righteous militaries around the world, on a global scale, that we protect all people from all types of harm. And there's a really great quote I learned from my friend Mark England, who's very brilliant. I'd invite people to check out his work. And he told me this quote from Rudolf Steiner that I love. And it says, anything that seeks to restrict or bind by definition is Luciferian. And so as we get into these muddled times and people are so divided, and it's so weird because one side will call one side a Karen, the other side calls the other side a Karen, then right, you're a fascist. No, you're a fascist. Although only one group is actually doing the things of a fascist. You know what I mean? So that's just what truth is. But you know, when this is all going on, if you want to know if you're on the side of truth, God, spirit, or the creator, well, do your beliefs require someone else's submission? Are you taking away someone else's freedom? If that's what you're doing, you are on the side of the oppressor. No matter what story that you believe in. If I believe with all my might that I go out there and I'm going to die if you drive a car because people drink and drive, and I know somebody that died in a drunk driving accident, so nobody in the world to drive cars, no one's allowed. I can believe that, but I can't enforce that on every single person. I might believe that back in the day that saying, hey, you know what? Like no one should have a gun, right? That's a big hot topic now because the next stage in this is they need to come get your guns because this is a globalist takeover and it is by design. And you can look at all, it's super easy to figure out if you do a little bit of digging. But the next thing they want to do is guns. So I could believe guns murder and it's horrible and they should be off the face of this planet. I can believe that, but I can't go and take that right from you. Now, if you use that and you harm someone, you are immediately held accountable to the fullest extent of tribal community law, right? Immediately as an individual. And those cases would be very rare when someone needs to be held very accountable. And interestingly, also, what I learned with studying with the Native Americans is that if somebody in the tribe or community committed harm to another person, they would tend to that person, and they would also tend to the person who created the harm to figure out what was going on with them that they would act out like that. And our systems and our society is created in a way to create chaos. It's created in a way to create violence, to create anger, to create disconnect from everything. So these are symptoms of a cause that is being manufactured, right? And so if I want to take away your right to do anything, I'm on the Luciferian side. Now that means I have to surrender to other people's things, but they can't harm me, right? That's the limit. I can protect myself to the fullest extent of my ability. But if you are a good person moving around, the chances of that are incredibly rare. And that's also surrendering to the bigger picture. You can get taken out by a hurricane, a volcano, get hit by a car, many different ways to eat crap here. You know, we all know we're going to die, but you know, are you going to live in fear each day? And so one of the very important things that's happening right now is that, you know, you've gone through this because you've done plant medicine and other work. It's becoming okay in contemplating with your death. You know, shoot, I'm going to die. Wow, that's intense. I don't know when that's going to happen. I don't have 1,000 years. And people who really want to restrict others haven't done this work. They haven't surrendered to that knowing that they will pass. And so these are higher levels of evolution. So that's how you know what side you're on, is if you must impede someone else, right? I can impede you from harming me, right? That you can go about your business somewhere else, but you can't create systems or things that remove my choice, right? As long as I am not harming other people, as long as I'm abiding by essentially the 10 commandments, right? Then we're okay. And so, you know, that's kind of what I see going on here.
Beautiful. We got 10 minutes, brother. What do you think the next few years are going to look like?
Well, I'm constantly interviewing some of the brightest people on the planet and asking their point of view. I probably put 600 hours of research in since last March onto the coronavirus and what was going on there. And now I'm moving full tilt into law and probably put 200 hours into that so far. And so what I think is going to happen, because it's written, these people are literally Luciferian Satanists. It's just what it is. That's, you know, if you don't think so, go look up Michael Aquino, and he will tell you publicly in an interview. And there's interviews from the 1980s. There's interviews from 1990s.
You're talking about the group of people that run this planet that have the most power, right?
Yeah, pretty much, right? You know, big influences. And, you know, you could just think about it, you know, back in the day, you had merchants and you had people with power. They have more influence. That's it.
Right.
That's all it is, right? And they just want more power and influence. And that's all that's going on. But the main structures are banking, government, and law, and the bar association working hand in hand to create these systems. And so that's what I'm learning about law. And so part of this system, I guess, on this planet is that they need to tell you what they're going to do. And it has to be consent based, because the first question I've been asking people who really understand the law, I'll say, aren't you concerned that they're just going to round us up and take us all out? He goes, and every one of them has said they can't. This is a commerce based, consent based system. There are spiritual laws here. If they take away your free will, they will get a consequence. And they don't want that. Now, can they set up the systems to create chaos where we take each other out? Yes, they can. Apparently.
And that's what they're doing. Absolutely. So we vote with our dollar. All of that is amazing. My question is, do you believe that these people are human, or do you believe these people are some other form of incarnation or other form of connection with source, or a different source or something like that?
Yeah, it's a good question. I've gone down the rabbit holes. Every rabbit hole that exists, pretty much. I've been right down to the bottom and scraped the bottom. I don't know. I've heard many different theories. I can say at the very least, they have a different philosophy on life, a different perspective, right? So you could go to the religion of Zen, or the philosophy of Zen, the philosophy of Taoism, the philosophy of Mormonism, and whatever the case is, right? They have these different philosophies. Their philosophy and indoctrination is control and harm. It is not something that most people think of. You know, it's the polar opposite of human nature.
Mm-hmm.
The problem is they have immense power now. So you and I don't think around how
But
can I go.
but to be clear, it's not heart based. It's not a heart based. It's a mental, very analytical, strategic structure that they've created to harm us.
Yeah, it's very control structure. It's not compassion. It's not
Power
based in
over, power
yeah,
over versus power with.
there you go. Yeah, 100%. It is not in collaboration. It is with control,
Mm-hmm.
right? Control and then take. How can I take everything? They want to take all the land, all the resources. They want everything, and this is groups of people that, again, you can look back in history and they've got more power, more power, more power. The beautiful thing is that, they're never going to overcome the human spirit. You can have a candle in a room and no amount of darkness can take out that candle. You go into a dark room and you bring a candle, that's going to light up the whole room. And then you grab all these other candles, you can ignite all those other candles without diminishing the length of life of the original candle. And that's an analogy I love for what's going on. And now, so for what's going on now, they have to tell you what they're going to do. And so you can read Klaus Schwab's book. You can read Silent Weapons from NASA in 1953. You can look at the interview from Dr. John Coleman that I post on my library about a vaccine to control the world and control the population. You can look at the work of Rudolf Steiner in the 1910s talking about this, saying they're going to create a vaccine to remove the spiritual inclination of man and remove that from the system. And you can read their books and their documents. And when you know how to read between the lines, it's incredibly obvious what the agenda is. And so from what I see, and from what many of the experts that I'm talking to who are world class, I talked to a forensic economist. I didn't even know what that was or understood what he was saying to me about the banking. I talked to really brilliant people, and I always ask them this question: how do you see things going? And what I see is in January, they're going to roll out in Canada. They're going to roll out the probably creative food shortage in Q2. There's a leaked email that's going just toe to toe for this. They want to roll out the universal basic income in Canada in Q2. In the States, they're coming for your guns. And this, I called all the stuff that happened in the States last year accurately. And all the other researchers that I'm in groups with now, we're all on Telegram because we got booted out. We were all 95% accurate because they have to tell you, we just found it, right? It wasn't, you just need to look at it and you use some critical thinking. And so they want to go to a digital dollar. So they're looking at that. So by January, I feel like we're going to start to get a little bit more squirrely with what things are going on, a little bit more chaotic in the cities, because people, it is exactly the Matrix where they're so ingrained into the system, they cannot let it go. They cannot let it go. So they're going to go down swinging. They're going to go down with the system. Many people are getting the vaccines, and this year we're scheduled for a worse flu season. And so I think a lot of people are going to end up dying from those flu seasons because they're going to have their immune system weakened. Many vaccine deaths have already happened and many adverse effects. And so that's where we're going to start to see the real deaths, hopefully no other complications. We have 5G technology up and running now, which there are many reports and studies from credible people all over the world about the harm that they can cause if they turn them on. And whatever magic they can do with those. And so that's where I think stuff gets a little bit more squirrely. Now, the good news is there's solution in understanding, and I recommend there's great resources in the States. Understanding contract law, I think, is one. There's Cal Washington, Mark Patelik. There are many people who understand the law, and you understand it's commerce. They're using it always goes to the higher jurisdiction, right? So the higher the jurisdiction, they have to abide by that. So if you worked in Walmart, for example, right, you'd have to obey the manager of Walmart. Well, the manager of Walmart has to obey the legislation of Los Angeles. Los Angeles has to obey the legislations of California. California to the United States Corporation, not the Republic. Outside of the United States Corporation, which you're all corporate citizens, you're basically, your birth certificate is sold or traded on the New York Stock Exchange rather as money for this corporation, as an asset for all the taxes and all the things that you'll pay, as a debt-based asset for this corporation that's bankrupt. Outside of that is the Republic. inside the US corporation, if you can get to the outside republic, they would have to abide by that. And they're getting you through contract law. And I'm only a beginner at this. I'm only just
Mhm.
starting to understand this. But all the people I talk to say there is remedy in that. And so my suggestion for people is to start really looking into law. It's a don't pass go, don't collect 200, because you need to know how to defend yourself, because it'll just go to a court. If you understand that, you can get out of it, and you can remain honorable and not contract with, I want to travel, but I don't want this vaccine. I want to work. I want to get groceries, but they say I have to have a vaccine. No, you don't. They're just forcing you into a contract
Mhm.
that you don't want. You need to understand that. And then I think it's going to get a bit worse, but at the same time, there's communities of people getting together and start looking at who is thinking like you, who wants to have a good community, who wants to live and grow food and have clean water and all this different stuff. And everybody who's connected with their heart, with their soul, with their spirit, with collaboration, with cooperation is going to be led in that way. And so I do see things getting pretty rough by potentially January, increased riots, things like that, especially in Canada, because we're getting really bad over here. But people won't take to the streets very much. We're pretty docile. And so we want to figure out a place where we can go safely in smaller communities, because I feel like the bigger cities that are more populated, especially in the States, your blue states, because that's where they're really clamping down. In Canada, it's like everything, it's just one big, you know, communist dictatorship right now, and they just keep taking more and more rights away for the guise of public safety, and not giving us opportunity to do anything that we want to flourish. So they want to bankrupt us, so we go on the government teat, and then we go into that crypto dollar, and it's all input. This is all public record. You can go to Agenda 2030. You can look at Catherine Austin Fitts. You can look at many resources. You can look at Klaus Schwab's book, The Great Reset. And they tell you this isn't my opinion. This is factual from their resources. And so that's my suggestion is look into law, and then look into places where you can go, where it's quieter, where you have your food, water management. And from there, you can allow whoever wants to, this is required to have participation, right? People
Mhm.
need to participate in the slavery of other people. So you participate in growing something better. So you might navigate this in a very beautiful way with very little resistance. It's kind of like in martial arts, the punch you don't see hurts the most. It'll knock you out. And so if you can see it coming for what it is, decide the solution you want and go to commit to that, you're going to find other people. You find 10 people with those values that want to just kind of step away, that want to live simply, that want to live under the guidelines of the creator and support. You don't have to participate in that, and it all is required to participate. And I know it's not gonna succeed at all,
Mhm.
but they're not gonna stop. This is
Mhm.
their plan. This is what they want to do. They're not going to stop, and they're going to see how far that they can go.
Absolutely. So let's just end. We got to come to a close here, but it sounds like community is the new currency. What could we do to build community around us? And I think we have to draw boundaries there, because I've been drawing a lot of boundaries lately in my life and getting really focused and strategic as to who is actually my community. And they're people that really do they don't have to be on the same page as me, but they got to be reading the same book in the same chapter. You know what I mean? And if they're not reading the same book or the same chapter, it's too much. I can't handle it. So would you say that community is the new currency? And for the simple-minded folks out there, or I'm talking about myself, simple-minded, I'm
Me
talking
too,
about
buddy.
myself,
Me too. Oh,
but
me
but
too.
but really, I'm like, hey, if I can have good people around me, we can have a little dance party and have some good food, and kids are running around, everybody's happy. That's a win for me. So
Yeah, I 100% agree with that. Start with the people you know, your friends and your family and your immediate community. That's the
mhm,
most important thing you can do. Then you can do what you're doing is start sharing things in your truth, because you're sending the signal of who you are. That's one of the things the podcast did for me. People, that's why I've gotten these amazing guests like David Martin, who was on Plandemic 2, and the guy's amazing. Like I'm like right at the heart of people looking for solutions. These giants in law that are in Canada that I'm now connected to personally. People who have come out of the woodworks like Dr. Andrew Kaufman, Kelly Brogan, people like that, because I've been sending up the signal for 5 years of who I am and what I'm about. And what I am trying to put energy towards is a good, beautiful, peaceful, incredible world for everybody. I need to create that for myself. There's so much chaos and there's so many issues. So what can I do? I'm going to do my little bit. And someone's like, you know what? I'm going to do my little bit. I'm going to do my little bit. So you send out that signal for, your creation in the world, and you will be led. If you are pure of heart and spiritual integrity, you'll be shown the way. I have 100% confidence in that. And we just might have to let go of some of the ideas of what we thought was going to happen, but it's going to be even more beautiful. And like I said, you get 10 families, 15 people that just want clean food, clean water, a spiritual connection. You have the whole entire universe, the creator on your side. We've just forgotten how to do the basic things, how to live off the land, how to provide for ourselves. That's all. So we just need to relearn that, and people will teach you. And so we will find those communities, we'll find that support, and just eyes wide open without fear. The only way that this goes through is fear. That's it. That's all they have is fear, distraction, illusion, and competition, and us fighting with each other. So go to peace, stay in peace, find compassion for those who really want to oppress you and even restrain you. Just say, no, thank you, and walk away. No, thank you. No, thank you. You know what I mean? I'm going to move over here and I'm going to build with these types of people. And when they're ready, you'll be the one that welcomes them in, right? This is what we're doing. This is where we're at, and we're going to find extraordinary solutions because people are waking up every single second, and they in their hearts want these solutions. And those types of people are creators, right? When you're trying to limit creation. It's Luciferian. It's dark. You're trying to suppress other humans, suppress spirits. So go to the side of creation where you can create and flourish freely, and invite others who have same like mind and like spirit to join and collaborate on something beautiful together.
So to sum it all up, keep on creating.
That's it, man.
All right. Well, thanks for this episode of Raw, Real, and Reconnected with Matt Belair. Matt, it was an honor. It was a pleasure. I enjoyed this conversation so much. I can't wait to get it out there to the world. And I would love to have you back in a couple months and see where you're at with your law journey and all the things that you're learning. And lots of blessings to you and your family, brother.
You too, man. It was a privilege and an honor. And make sure you support Alex, share the episode, and leave a review because it's a ton of work. So thank you for diving in, brother. I appreciate you. I appreciate your friendship. And thank you for having me.
Let's go, brother. Peace out.